Welcome to Chase Austen's international best-selling Sam Wick action thriller series, Book 1, Wicked Deceit. About Wicked Deceit. The government created Sam Wick to be the perfect killing machine and then sent him to hunt. Sam Wick is the one the government calls on to extract people out of the worst enemy places on Earth. Where the government cannot and will not go, he will. There is no guarantee that he'll succeed every time, but he doesn't have a choice, or does he? When a New York Times reporter becomes the target of a deadly plot orchestrated by the corrupt president of Venezuela, the U.S. government turns to their top-secret weapon. Sam Wick is their only hope of saving the journalist before it's too late. As the clock ticks down and the body count rises, Wick finds himself caught in a web of deceit and betrayal. With time running out and bullets flying, he must use all of his skills and cunning to outmaneuver the president's ruthless agents and complete his mission. But as Wick digs deeper into the plot, he realizes that nothing is as it seems, and he may be the one in the greatest danger of all. Can he outwit the president and save the reporter before it's too late? Or will he become the next victim in the president's deadly game? Prologue. Vienna, Austria. The encrypted phone's red light pulsed once on the nightstand before going dark. Carlos Cruz Diaz bolted upright in bed, instincts honed by 3 years of death threats screaming danger. The cabin windows rattled under Vienna's autumn wind, but that wasn't what had woken him. Something felt wrong. A presence in the shadows, the subtle wrongness that preceded violence. What is it? Karina's voice cut through the darkness, instantly alert. No grogginess, no confusion. She was already sitting up, her journalist's instincts as sharp as his. Don't know. Carlos slipped from the sheets, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The cabin carried the scent of pine logs and the lingering aroma of their dinner, a far cry from the sterile safe houses they'd known. Could be nothing. But in his line of work, nothing was ever nothing. Karina sat up, dark hair falling across her shoulders like a curtain. In the pale moonlight filtering through the cabin's windows, her eyes held that fierce intelligence that had first captivated him at the UN Human Rights Council, not during combat, but during a heated debate where she'd systematically dismantled a regime apologist's arguments. "The consulate appointment," she said, reading his mind. "You're having second thoughts." Carlos moved to the window, peering through the glass at the forest beyond, his hand unconsciously rubbing the base of his neck where tension had been building all day. "In a few days, I'll sign papers and become nobody. Just another exile who traded his country for what? A better life? Peace?" Her voice carried an edge now. "Carlos, look at me." He turned, his gaze briefly darting to the door before meeting her eyes. Karina had pulled on her robe, her hands steady despite the worry in her eyes. Professional, controlled, the investigative journalist who'd stood by him through every threat and evacuation. "For 3 years you've torn that regime apart piece by piece," she continued. "Every article, every expose, you've made them bleed. But tomorrow you walk away. Really walk away. No more crusades, no more midnight calls from sources, just us." Carlos studied her face, noting the tiny lines of stress around her eyes, evidence of the toll their life had taken. The way she still flinched slightly at unexpected sounds, the way she never quite relaxed, even here, even in their sanctuary. "I had the nightmare again last night," Karina said quietly. "The same one. You're in a room with white walls, sterile, like a hospital, but wrong somehow. There's this underlying mechanical hum, like machinery, but underneath it the chill of something unfeeling. And there are men in the corners, but I can't see their faces, they're just waiting. Promise me," she whispered, but her tone carried the weight of someone who'd already lost too much. For a heartbeat, Carlos felt the familiar itch in his chest, the compulsion to keep fighting, to keep writing, to keep bleeding Chambers' regime until it collapsed. But then he looked at Karina, really looked at her, and saw what 3 years of running had cost them both. "I promise." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. Chapter 1. Palacio de Miraflores, Caracas, Venezuela, 2:13 a.m. local time. What could you possibly offer the man who controlled not only your destiny, but that of your entire country? The man who ruled with an iron fist, whose mere whisper could topple corporations, and whose silence could freeze bank accounts. The man who had the Russian president on his speed dial and flaunted that connection like a loaded gun at the temple of Western democracy. The man who had once given the finger to the U.S. president at a diplomatic convention, the photo becoming a rallying cry for anti-American sentiment across Latin America, his smirk immortalized on T-shirts and protest banners. The man whose birthday celebrations would cost the Treasury more than the annual healthcare budget of 3 provinces combined. What could you possibly give the president of your country on his birthday? But Enrique Arias Cardenas, the director of Venezuela Intelligence Service, had more on his mind than a birthday present while he waited in the visitors' lounge of the Palacio de Miraflores. The marble floors gleamed under the dim chandelier light, each footstep of the guards echoing like distant gunshots in the cavernous space. Their shadows danced on the walls adorned with portraits of revolutionary heroes, their painted eyes seeming to follow his every move with historical judgment. He glanced at the 19th century wall clock above the majestic office door, its brass pendulum swinging with mechanical precision, marking time like a metronome counting down to execution. It was 2:13 in the morning, and Caracas lay beneath them like a sprawling beast, its streets empty save for military patrols and the occasional pack of stray dogs. The city lights twinkled through the bulletproof windows, a deceptive calm masking the undercurrent of tension that always preceded the president's birthday celebrations. Enrique wasn't even thinking of sleep. There wasn't any time. He sat at the edge of the Italian leather couch with his back straight, his hands sweating even in the temperature-controlled room that carried the faint scent of tobacco, power, and fear. The smell reminded him of his father's study, where as a boy he had learned his first lessons about power, how to acquire it, how to keep it, and most importantly, how to survive it. The phone call had come exactly 57 minutes ago, the harsh trill cutting through his dreams like a blade. His wife had stirred beside him, muttering something about, "Those damn Americans again," before rolling over. If only it had been the Americans. They at least were predictable in their hostility. But this call had come from inside the palace, and that made it infinitely more dangerous. Since then, he was racking his brain to construe a reason for the urgency of this meeting but got nothing. Not a pleasant situation to be in, especially for the director of Venezuela's premier intelligence agency, a man who prided himself on knowing everything before it happened. He already had a meeting scheduled with the president at 8 in the morning, just before the whole country would start celebrating their leader's birthday. Festivities had been planned for the next 7 days, the streets already draped with red banners and propaganda posters that proclaimed "Viva el Presidente" in letters large enough to be seen from space. Over the past weeks, he and his men had been busy foiling the attempts by radical extremists to devise disruptions in the celebrations, each threat neutralized with clinical efficiency. 3 bomb plots, 2 assassination attempts, and 1 particularly creative plan involving poisoned birthday cake, all handled without ever reaching the president's ears. His office had been diligent in sending daily briefs to the president's office, each report carefully worded to highlight the threats while emphasizing their complete control over the situation. What, then, had warranted this late-night summons? What was it that could not wait for 6 more hours? One of the officers standing alert near the grand door, his automatic weapon a dark promise against his chest, lifted his right hand to his earpiece and then glanced at Enrique. The movement was subtle, but in their world, subtlety often preceded catastrophe. It was time. As Enrique fell in step with his escort, their footsteps creating a synchronized rhythm on the marble, he coughed twice, attempting to relax the lump in his throat. It didn't work. He took his hands out of his trouser pockets to reduce the sweating. That didn't work either. His grandfather's gold ring felt heavy on his finger, a family heirloom that had witnessed 3 generations of men serving power, each in their own way. Then the big mahogany doors opened before him with the faint creak of well-oiled hinges, the sound like death's gentle exhalation, and it was too late to do anything. He took a deep breath and hoped for the best, though hope had long ago proven itself the least reliable currency in their business. President Nicholas Chambers stood at the royal desk, crushing the New York Times between his fists until his knuckles went white. The newspaper's headline seared into Henrique's vision: Venezuela's reign of terror. Inside, the regime's war on its own people. Below it, that fucking byline: Carlos Cruz Diaz. Always, Carlos Cruz Diaz. Chambers' hands shook, not from fear but from rage so pure it threatened to crack his teeth. He could taste copper where he'd bitten his tongue, could feel his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged animal desperate for release. The gold presidential seal caught the light behind him like a malevolent eye, while the room reeked of leather, wood polish, and something else. The sweet decay of absolute power left too long in the heat. The man was not just upset, he was seething with anger, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. In all his years of service, Enrique had seen the president furious many times. But this was different. This was the quiet fury that preceded purges and disappearances. Through the bulletproof windows, Caracas sprawled below them like a diseased organism, its arteries clogged with military checkpoints and surveillance posts. His legacy, his empire, being systematically dismantled by a man who'd once called him friend. "You read it?" Chambers asked without turning around, his voice carrying the barely controlled violence of a man on the edge. "Yes, sir. The article has been shared 14,000 times in the past hour. Our digital warfare unit is implementing countermeasures, but—" "Shut up." Chambers faced his intelligence director, noting the sweat beading on Enrique's forehead despite the air conditioning. "I don't want damage control. I want Cruz Diaz dead." He jerked his hand and the newspaper slid across the polished mahogany to Henrique, who stopped it with a swift gesture, quickly glancing at the columnist's name: Carlos Cruz Diaz. Cruz Diaz, the eternal thorn in their side, the expatriate journalist who had once been their own, until principles got in the way of loyalty. "You know why he can so boldly accuse us of these baseless charges?" Chambers stepped closer, invading personal space until he could smell Henrique's fear sweat. Henrique appeared alarmed by the anger but maintained a stoic silence. It was a rhetorical question, and in their line of work, answering rhetorical questions was a rookie mistake that could cost you everything. "I should have killed him." The president's voice grew low now, almost meditative, which made it all the more terrifying. "I should have killed him and hanged him for others to see and learn instead of letting him leave the country." His hand caressed the edge of the desk, as if imagining a neck beneath his fingers. The betrayal didn't just burn, it metastasized, spreading through his chest like cancer. The same whiskey he'd shared with Carlos during late-night strategy sessions, back when his former advisor believed in the revolution. Back when those idealistic eyes held something approaching worship. "We can still do it." Henrique finally had something to offer, his voice steady despite his racing heart. In that moment, he realized he had been preparing for this conversation all his life, even before he knew it would happen. His spine straightened almost imperceptibly, the shift from hunted prey to calculating predator. "How?" The president's eyes gleamed with sudden interest, like a predator catching the scent of blood. "He visited our consulate in Vienna a few days ago." Henrique let the information hang in the air between them, a deadly possibility taking shape. "Why did no one tell me that?" The president's tone dropped to a menacing murmur, the kind that had preceded many sudden resignations and unfortunate accidents. "It was in the PDB," Henrique said, referring to the president's daily brief sent by his office. Chambers waved a dismissive hand at the mention, confirming what Henrique already knew. The president rarely read the full briefings, preferring instead to react to crises as they emerged. It was a dangerous habit, but not one that any subordinate dared to mention. The president considered it for a moment, his fingers drumming a quiet rhythm of contemplation on the ancient wood, each tap like a heartbeat in the silent room. "How soon?" "He is going to visit again. We can take care of him then if you want." Henrique kept his voice neutral, as if discussing the weather rather than state-sanctioned murder. "How?" "It's better if you remain unaware of the modalities." This was the dance they had perfected over years, the art of saying everything while saying nothing, of promising death while discussing diplomacy. The room fell silent except for the distant growl of armored vehicles patrolling the streets below. Through the windows, Chambers could see muzzle flashes from the favelas. Another purge, another lesson in obedience. The president weighed this momentarily, plausible deniability, before a slow smile appeared on his lips like a knife being unsheathed in a dark alley. Perfect. Make it permanent. Sir, I should mention, is there a problem, Director? The question landed like a blade between them. Enrique's eyes flickered for just a microsecond, but Chambers caught it. Hesitation. Moral conflict. The first symptom of disloyalty. No, sir, no problem. Excellent. Chambers smiled, and it was a predator's expression, all teeth and no warmth. Because tomorrow is my birthday, Enrique, and I've decided what I want as a gift. Enrique smiled too, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. This was his birthday present to the president, not a gift wrapped in paper and ribbon, but one wrapped in shadows and silence, sealed with blood yet to be spilled. As Enrique left the office, walking past the guards who stood like statues, he felt the weight of what he had just set in motion. Tomorrow, the streets would be filled with celebration, music would play, and people would dance. But somewhere in Vienna, a clock had started ticking for Carlos Cruz Diaz, though he didn't know it yet. And that, Enrique reflected, was the true art of their profession, the ability to end lives while the world kept dancing. As the door closed behind his intelligence chief, Chambers opened the newspaper again. Carlos's author photo stared back at him, that same earnest face that had once sat in this very office, sharing whiskey and dreams of revolution. "Happy birthday to me," he whispered to his reflection. But as he spoke, Chambers made a mental note to have Enrique watched. In his experience, men who hesitated usually died. The only question was whether they'd take their masters with them. Outside, Caracas burned with the low-intensity fire of oppression, and somewhere in Vienna, a man who'd chosen love over loyalty was about to discover that some debts could never be forgiven. Chapter 2. 0600 hours, Task Force 77, Command Center, Luxembourg. The reinforced steel door slid open with a pneumatic hiss that always reminded Jessica of a coffin sealing shut. The air inside carried the sterile bite of ozone from overworked servers, cut through with the bitter aftertaste of too much coffee and not enough sleep. Somewhere in the facility's depths, cooling systems hummed their mechanical lullaby, the only sound that never stopped in this tomb of concrete and classified secrets. She looked up from the tactical display as Sam Wick's silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by harsh fluorescent corridors that never saw natural light. Even at this distance, she could read the coiled stillness in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a loaded weapon waiting for a target. Wick's ice-blue eyes performed an instantaneous tactical assessment of the room, an ingrained habit from too many compromised safe houses and ambushed briefings. The conference chamber was standard NATO spec. Reinforced walls rated to withstand a direct missile strike, electromagnetic shielding against surveillance, and enough defensive countermeasures to hold off a small army. A massive briefing table dominated the center, its surface embedded with classified holographic projection technology. 12 ergonomic command chairs, each equipped with personal data terminals, flanked the table. The far wall served as a tactical projection surface, currently displaying real-time satellite feeds from 3 continents. He moved with fluid economy, selecting a position that gave him clear sightlines to both the main display and the room's 2 exits, primary and emergency. Most operators would have chosen the head of the table. Wick preferred survival over status. Team Vesuvius was already assembled around the tactical planning table, the blue glow of holographic displays casting shadows across their faces. The 3 team members, Jessica, Stan, and Mac, looked up simultaneously. Their combat-ready postures, honed by years of high-stakes operations, remained tense at the sight of the familiar operative. Jessica was the only one who had run missions with Wick before. Sta and Mac were the newbies in this setup, but they knew what he could do. And they also knew what he'd done in Iran. "Morning, sunshine," Stan called out without looking up from his rifle maintenance kit. His hands moved with surgical precision, reassembling a Barrett M82A1 bolt assembly while humming something that sounded like Metallica. The sniper had been twitchy ever since their last op, when his spotter took shrapnel to the face. Now Stan worked alone, his rifle receiving the kind of meticulous attention most people reserved for lovers. Mac didn't acknowledge Wick's arrival at all. The cyber specialist sat hunched over a holographic interface, fingers dancing across light-projected keys while downing his fourth energy drink of the morning. The kid was brilliant, could crack Pentagon firewalls before breakfast, and had the dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been awake for 36 hours straight, again. But his studied indifference to Wick's presence spoke volumes about the lingering fallout from Tehran. "Jesus, Mac," Jessica muttered. "When's the last time you saw sunlight?" "Sunlight's overrated." Mac's voice carried the caffeine jittery edge of someone operating on stimulants and stubbornness. "Besides, real hackers are vampires. Everyone knows that." Team Vesuvius was one of Task Force 77's premier support units, and with good reason. In a world where black operations demanded both precision and deniability, they were the best of both worlds. Task Force 77, TF-77 to those with high enough clearance to know it existed, operated in the shadows between official sanctions and necessary actions. Born from a classified merger of NSA intelligence capabilities and U.S. military special operations, it was the option of last resort when diplomacy failed and conventional forces weren't enough. No congressional oversight, no official records, just results. Armed with cutting-edge military hardware and real-time NSA intelligence feeds, the unit specialized in operations that governments would deny knowledge of, even while secretly authorizing them. They were the ghost in the machine, the knife in the dark, the team that didn't exist conducting missions that never happened. Jessica commanded Team Vesuvius with the precise calculation of a chess grandmaster and the tactical instincts of a predator. Her background was heavily redacted even in classified files, but the whispers followed her. Former Israeli intelligence, ex-British SAS trainer, deep cover operative in circles so dark even the CIA wouldn't touch them. The only certainty was her expertise in turning impossible situations into successful missions. Whether orchestrating complex extraction operations or engaging in close-quarters combat, she operated with a lethal grace that had earned her near-mythical status among Black Ops communities. Stan, the team's precision instrument, was former Marine Force Recon. His sniper skills had earned him multiple classified citations before being recruited by TF-77. He could put a bullet through a target's ear at 2,000 meters in high winds, a skill he demonstrated with chilling regularity. His competition shooting records were classified. Too many questions about how one man could achieve that level of accuracy. Mac, surrounded by an array of custom hardware that would make the NSA's Q branch jealous, was the digital phantom that made their impossible missions possible. His fingers danced across holographic keyboards as he processed terabytes of data in real time. System encryption that would take government supercomputers months to crack fell to his custom algorithms in minutes. In a world where information was the ultimate weapon, Mac was a digital warhead. Together, they had conducted operations that had quietly shaped global politics without leaving a trace. Regime changes, prevented terror attacks, extracted high-value assets, all accomplished with surgical precision and complete deniability. Wick knew their capabilities intimately. He had seen their mission files and fought alongside Jessica in places that didn't officially exist, conducting operations that would never see the light of day. His reputation as a lethal TF-77 asset was legendary. Standing at 5'11", his weather-beaten face radiated a dangerous aura, intensified by his penetrating ice-blue eyes that assessed each target with cold precision. His slick-back black hair and athletic build reinforced the image of a man engineered for the art of killing. TF-77 assigned him their most complex and seemingly impossible operations, from which he had always returned successful. Until Iran. His methodology was characterized by taciturnity, sharp observation, and uncompromising efficiency. Within just over 4 years, he had increased his success rate from 90 to over 300 operations. At 27, unlike many operatives his age, he stood out for his inconspicuousness. He favored proven, straightforward tactics over spectacular maneuvers, yet achieved the seemingly impossible, regardless of resistance, adverse conditions, or hopeless situations. His procedures and strategies served as case studies for TF-77's operational planning, particularly in analyzing low-risk success strategies. He was the operator who never deviated from mission parameters, who never let emotion override protocol, who always brought his people home alive. Until Tehran. Until the cleric. Until everything went sideways in a way that left questions no one wanted to answer. Wick's expressionless face betrayed nothing as he settled into his chosen position, but the tension in the room was palpable. Mac's pointed indifference, Stan's careful neutrality, Jessica's calculating assessment of the team dynamics. The Iran extraction had been textbook until the final moment. Wick had penetrated the Revolutionary Guard compound, neutralized 7 hostiles, and reached the target. A mid-level cleric who possessed detailed intelligence on Iranian nuclear capabilities and had information that the USA wanted. The extraction route was clear. The helicopter was inbound. All Wick had to do was secure the asset and move to the extraction point. Instead, he'd put 2 rounds center mass into the cleric's chest and walked away. The official inquiry had taken 6 weeks. NSA Director William Helms had personally intervened to keep Wick operational, citing operational necessities beyond the scope of standard protocol review. Whatever Wick had seen in that room, whatever had justified his decision to execute rather than extract, had been classified at levels that made even TF-77 commanders nervous. Wick maintained his actions were justified. He showed no remorse, offered no explanations beyond the minimum required by operational debrief. But the incident had shattered his reputation as the operator who never veered from the plan. Now, 3 months later, they sent him to Poland, and now this. His assignment to this mission now filled the support teams with uncertainty rather than confidence. The briefing room itself felt wrong today. Maybe it was the storm system moving through Luxembourg, or the way the holographic displays cast everything in electric blue shadows that seemed to writhe and shift with each flicker of data. "Anyone else feel like we're being fed to the wolves today?" Jessica asked, her eyes never leaving Wick's perfectly composed features. "Every day, Jess." Stan looked up from his rifle with a wry smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Question is whether we bite back." "Speak for yourself," Max said, not lifting his eyes from the screen. "I'm immortal in cyberspace. Meat space is where things get messy." Wick said nothing. His face remained a mask of professional indifference, revealing nothing of whatever calculations were running behind those ice-blue eyes. The door sealed behind them with a pressurized thunk that seemed to echo longer than usual. Somewhere in the facility's depths, automated systems were already purging digital records of this meeting. Task Force 77 existed in the spaces between official acknowledgement and plausible deniability, a ghost unit for ghost wars. Jessica studied her teammates one by one, Stan, using humor to mask uncertainty, Mac, hiding behind screens and code, Wick, an enigma wrapped in operational excellence and recent controversy. Wick was still the best at what he did, but Iran had cracked something fundamental in his dynamics, and something about today's mission felt like it would either repair that crack or shatter them completely. Chapter 3. Mission Briefing, 06:15 hours. Andrew McAvoy entered the briefing room with the effortless command of a man who owned the world, bespoke suit flowing around him like liquid confidence, his gaze direct and unwavering. As TF-77's operational director, his clearance level was so high it didn't have a name, just a color code that made everyone around him nervous. But Wick caught the tells immediately. The slight tension in McAvoy's jaw, the way his right hand kept adjusting his tie, the microdilation of his pupils that suggested elevated stress hormones. "Morning, ladies and gentlemen." McAvoy's voice carried calm authority, but his eyes had already darted away from Wick's direct stare. "We have a situation developing in Vienna." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of a middle-aged man with intelligent eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. Carlos Cruz Diaz, Venezuelan exile, human rights activist and columnist, and currently our most valuable asset in undermining the Chamber's regime. Jessica leaned forward. Asset? I thought he was just a guy who writes for some of the newspaper. He is, but his articles have cost Venezuela approximately $8 billion in foreign investment and triggered EU sanctions that are slowly strangling their economy. From our perspective, he's been more effective than 3 regime change operations combined. Mac's fingers paused over his keyboard. Past tense? McAvoy took a barely perceptible breath, his gaze flickering away before delivering the blow. Venezuelan intelligence has decided to terminate his citizenship. Permanently. That too on the foreign soil. Tomorrow morning. Vienna. The next keystroke brought up surveillance photos. Airport footage of a scarred man in a brown jacket. Meet Joaquin Thomas, the regime's top wet work specialist. 15 confirmed kills, all political dissidents, all made to look like accidents or suicides. Stan whistled low, his wry smile turning grim as he shrugged. That's a lot of ghosts for one man to carry. There's more. Another photo appeared, a clean-shaven man with military bearing. Felipe Massa, explosives expert, operating under diplomatic cover. They landed in Vienna just an hour ago. Wick studied the faces, memorizing every detail. The scar running from Joaquin's temple to his jaw. Old knife work, probably from close-quarters combat. Felipe's eyes, the flat, empty stare of a man who'd learned to kill without conscience. What's our mission? Jessica asked. Officially? Intelligence gathering. Unofficially? McAvoy paused, and for a moment his mask slipped, calculation warring with something that might have been guilt. His fingers drummed once against the table before he continued. Prevent the assassination by any means necessary. And if Cruz Diaz gets himself killed anyway? Stan asked. Then we extract his body and make sure the world knows exactly who pulled the trigger. The diplomatic fallout alone would cripple Venezuela's remaining international relationships, especially with Russia. Mac looked up from his screens. You're using us as political leverage. I'm using you to prevent a murder. McAvoy's tone sharpened. Unless anyone has moral objections to saving an innocent man's life? The question hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Wick's expression remained perfectly neutral, but internally, memory stirred. Iran had started with similar moral imperatives. Extract the asset, protect American interests, and serve the greater good. But sometimes the greater good required choices that protocol manuals couldn't anticipate. Rules of engagement? Wick's voice was flat, professional. Minimal exposure, no international incidents. If you have to eliminate hostile actors, make it look like internal Venezuelan intelligence conflicts. So we're giving ourselves a license to kill, Stan said, his dark humor accompanied by a sardonic grin that spoke of grim acceptance. You already have that license, I'm just telling you where to use it. McAvoy activated the final projection, building schematics of the Venezuelan consulate. Your Vienna contact is Jacob Hoffman, former GSG-9, now freelance logistics. He'll provide equipment and extraction routes. Questions? Jessica raised her hand. Why us? CIA has assets in Vienna. Because CIA assets have congressional oversight, media attention, and lawyers. You don't. McAvoy's smile was razor-thin. You're the scalpel when diplomacy fails and warfare is too blunt. What's the proposed approach? Asked Wick. Venezuela has been an unpredictable ally for some time, so absolute discretion is essential. Avoid any attention. McAvoy activated a new projection. This shows the front view of the Venezuelan consulate in Vienna, located on Prince Eugen Strasse. The consulate employs approximately 15 Venezuelan staff, including the ambassador. The remaining personnel consists of local hires. The manila folders before you contain all names, addresses, and photographs of the staff, including building blueprints. Your contact in Vienna, Jakob, will be responsible for transport and supply of ammunition, funds, documents, and other equipment. He will also handle the infiltration of your materials into the consulate. In case of complications, he's your contact for evacuation. As the briefing concluded, Wick caught McAvoy's arm. "Can I speak with you privately?" "Problem, Wick. Just want to confirm mission parameters." 5 minutes, McAvoy told the others. "Gear up and prep for departure." When they were alone, Wick moved closer. "What aren't you telling us?" "Excuse me?" "You're nervous. You keep touching your tie, your pupils are dilated, and you've avoided direct eye contact with me for the entire briefing. In my experience, that means someone's lying." McAvoy studied him for a long moment, then his shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. When he spoke again, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, and for the first time, he met Wick's gaze directly with something approaching desperation. "Carlos Cruz Diaz isn't just an asset, Wick. 3 years ago, he provided intelligence that helped us identify and eliminate a terrorist cell planning to hit the World Trade Center Memorial. The man saved thousands of American lives. And the intelligence he provided came from his position as a Venezuelan government advisor. He was our mole inside the Chambers regime until he thought his cover was blown and he left the country." McAvoy's expression carried genuine conviction now, a quiet plea beneath the authority. "We owe him. Personally." Wick nodded slowly. "So this isn't just about preventing an assassination. Number. It's about protecting someone who risked everything to help us. Don't let me down, Wick. We don't want another Tehran." As McAvoy left, Wick stood alone in the briefing room, staring at Carlos Cruz Diaz's photo on the display. Another asset to extract. Another mission where the stakes were higher than the briefing suggested. He thought about Iran, the moment he'd looked into that cleric's eyes and seen something that made extraction impossible. The choice between following orders and following instinct. The way NSA Director Helms had stared at him during the debrief and said, "Sometimes the mission parameters change in real time, son. That's why we send operators, not drones." This time would be different, it had to be. But as Wick prepared to leave the briefing room, he couldn't shake the feeling that every mission carried the potential for choices that no amount of planning could anticipate. And sometimes those choices defined you more than all the successful extractions combined. Chapter 4. Venezuela Consulate, Vienna, Austria. The Hermes scarf around Ana Sofia's neck cost more than most Venezuelans made in a year, a deliberate choice that whispered power in a language the diplomatic corps understood perfectly. She stalked through the consulate's marble corridors like a predator scenting blood, her Louboutin heels striking the floor with the precision of a metronome, counting down to execution. The 2 administrative assistants pressed themselves against their desks as she passed, recognizing the particular brand of fury that preceded someone's career being obliterated. Ambassador Carpio's corner office loomed ahead, the leather throne she'd been circling for 9 months, ever since her posting to Vienna had begun. Through the heavy mahogany doors lay her destiny, wrapped in diplomatic immunity and sealed with the blood of her competitors. Ana's mind flashed to Maracaibo 13 years ago, fresh from Universidad Central, naive enough to believe merit mattered more than flesh. The oil executive's hands on her thighs under the conference table, his whispered promise. "Play nice, and I'll make sure you get the energy ministry posting." She'd smiled, excused herself to the bathroom, and spent 20 minutes scrubbing his touch from her skin before returning to close the deal on her terms. That was the night she learned the first rule of survival. The game was rigged, but only fools refused to play. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from years of calculated victories, a sense of purpose evident in every practice step. Her instincts about her surroundings were bang on, honed by years of navigating political minefields. As a minister-counselor in Venezuela's consulate in Austria, she had perfected the art of walking the thin rope between expectations and reality, balancing on that wire like a circus performer who couldn't afford to fall. She was a fighter, her DNA coated with resilience. Her struggles had started the day she graduated from the Universidad Central de Venezuela 13 years ago, and she'd been fighting ever since, each battle leaving invisible scars that only made her stronger. Her rise to the top was a testament to her spirit, but it also signified the tough road faced by women all over her country, a path littered with broken heels and shattered dreams. Her hatred of losing pushed her more than her desire to win, burning in her gut like acid, fueling every calculated move. This was key to understanding what made her tick, what kept her awake at night plotting her next move. Men found her irresistible, like moths to a flame that could either warm or burn. Some found her harsh, their egos bruised by her sharp tongue, and even more were taken aback by her brash tactics. But she only cared about those who mattered to her in the larger scheme of things. Graceful at 5'10", with the legs of a Nordic goddess and eyes like Audrey Hepburn's, dark pools that could either seduce or intimidate, she tended to dress conservatively. Her sober pantsuits and knee-length skirts were armor, her black hair pulled back in a low ponytail like a warrior's helm. Yet she wasn't afraid to sex up her look when she knew it would be worth the effort, wielding her beauty like another weapon in her arsenal. Her road to glory had been paved with some not very laudable moments, including one-night stands with her ex-bosses, the last one being more than 7 years ago. The memories lingered like cigarette smoke in expensive hotel rooms. Some of them had been insipid, while a few were extremely torrid. Some of the best sex she'd ever had, and definitely the best sex they'd ever had, though that wasn't saying much. She wasn't ashamed of them, but preferred not to repeat them as she gained more confidence and subtlety in her dealings with power, learning that her mind was a far more effective tool than her body. But each encounter came with a deal, sealed with whispered promises in the dark, a deal to ensure that her star would not stop rising. And rise she did. Still in her early 30s, Anna was now very close to her ambition of becoming an ambassador. She pushed through Carpio's office door without knocking, watching his puffy face flush red as he fumbled to end his phone call. The old fool still thought he controlled her, still believed his pathetic indulgences gave him leverage. Anna, I'm in the middle of... The president's approval ratings just hit 18%. She slammed the classified polling data onto his desk with enough force to make his coffee cup jump, then leaned across the mahogany surface until her shadow fell across his face. 18. Even Maduro managed 23 before they ran him out of Caracas. Carpio instinctively pushed his chair back, creating distance, but Anna followed his retreat like a shark scenting blood in the water. The power dynamic shifted visibly, predator and prey, with no question about which was which. The opposition is calling for elections, Russia's threatening to pull oil subsidies, and you're sitting here playing diplomat while our entire government burns. Anna's voice dropped to a whisper that carried more menace than screaming. Tell me, Ambassador, when the regime falls, which side of history do you want to be on? The question hung between them like a blade. Anna had spent 3 years building her insurance policy, secret recordings, financial records, enough dirt to bury half of Caracas if the wind changed direction. Carpio knew it. The fear in his eyes confirmed it, but something else lurked in his expression. Not just fear, anticipation, as if he knew something she didn't. Anna's battlefield instincts, honed by years of navigating shark-infested political waters, suddenly crystallized into ice-cold clarity. The same Arctic awareness that had saved her from the energy minister's private dinner in 2019, when she'd spotted the second wine glass hidden behind the curtains. She turned slowly, following Carpio's gaze to the presidential couch in the corner. 2 men sat in the shadows like spiders waiting for flies. The first was clean-shaven with military posture and dead eyes, a soldier who'd learned to kill without conscience, but it was the second man who made her blood freeze. The scar running from his right temple to his jaw was a roadmap of violence, a white line that spoke of knife fights and close-quarters brutality. When he smiled, it was all teeth and malevolent satisfaction, the expression of a man who'd found his favorite prey. Anna. Carpio's voice cracked like thin ice. They're here at the president's request. Joaquin rose from the couch with fluid grace, his movements carrying the controlled precision of an apex predator. Minister Counselor Sophia, your reputation precedes you. Anna's training kicked in, diplomatic protocol masking the terror clawing at her chest. She had no idea who these men were, but their presence in Carpio's office, unannounced and uninvited, meant nothing good. The scarred one especially radiated the kind of controlled violence that spoke of professional killing. Whoever they weren't diplomats. Gentlemen. Her voice remained steady despite the ice water flooding her veins. I wasn't aware we were expecting visitors. Last-minute arrival, Felipe said, his accent carrying traces of military academy polish. Important business. Anna's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. These weren't bureaucrats or political appointees. The way they moved, the way they watched her. These were operators. The kind of men the regime sent when talking had failed and violence became necessary. What kind of business was she asked, though part of her already knew she didn't want the answer. Carpio cleared his throat, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Joaquin's voice cut through the diplomatic niceties like a scythe. The minister-counselor should know. After all, she'll be facilitating our guest's visit tomorrow. Guest. Anna's blood turned to Arctic slush as the pieces clicked into place. There was only one high-profile visit scheduled for tomorrow. Carlos Cruz Diaz, the expatriate journalist. The man who'd spent 3 years systematically dismantling the regime's international credibility. The man scheduled to visit the consulate tomorrow morning to finalize his citizenship renunciation. I see. Anna forced her diplomatic mask back into place, even as her mind cataloged escape routes and emergency protocols. And what exactly will my role be in this facilitation? Joaquin's smile widened, revealing teeth that sharpened his predatory expression into something inhuman. Simple. Make him comfortable, keep him calm, and most importantly, his eyes locked onto hers with predatory intensity. Make sure he doesn't leave until we've had our conversation with him. The euphemism hung in the air like poison gas. Conversation. Anna had survived 13 years in Venezuelan politics by reading between the lines, and these lines spelled murder. The office fell silent except for the whisper of climate control and the distant hum of Vienna traffic. Anna realized she was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of her life, however long that might be. Play along with assassination or find herself on these strangers' list of problems to solve. She thought of the scared girl from Maracaibo, the one who'd learned to smile while powerful men decided her fate. But that girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd clawed her way to the threshold of real power through cunning and ruthless pragmatism. Of course, Anna said, her voice steady as marble. Whatever the president requires. But behind her diplomatic smile, her mind was already working. If these men thought she'd become their accessory to murder, they'd severely underestimated the woman who'd survived 13 years in the snake pit of Venezuelan politics. Chapter 5. Inside the Gulf Stream, G650. The jet's custom interior gleamed with polished wood veneer and brushed metal accents, a cocoon of luxury that somehow made their mission feel even more dangerous in its incongruity. Wick sat in one of the hand-stitched leather seats near the front cabin, far away from his nearest neighbor Mac, who was keenly watching his every move. "Stop staring at him like that," Stan muttered, nudging Mac. Their reflections ghosted across the jet's oval windows as they cruised at 45,000 feet. "He is weird." Mac shifted in his ergonomic seat, the soft leather creaking under his movement. But his voice carried more than just observation. There was challenge in it, the sharp edge of someone who'd run the numbers and didn't like the statistical outcome. None of our business. What if he gets us all killed? Mac's fingers paused over his laptop keyboard, his eyes never leaving Wick's rigid posture. I mean, really, what if his decision-making is compromised? Iran proved he's willing to sacrifice mission parameters for emotional responses. You are not going in there with him, Jessica and I are. And no one knows what happened in Iran. Stan adjusted the collar of his bespoke suit, chosen to blend in with Vienna's diplomatic circles. What if he gets you killed? Mac asked, the jet's whisper-quiet engines underlining the accusation in his voice. Data doesn't lie, Stan. Reckless operators have a mortality rate of, "Shut up and do what Jessica asked you to." The words cut through the pressurized cabin air. "You mean what he asked for through Jessica." Mac's breath slightly fogged the sleek laptop screen as he leaned forward. "Since when do we take unilateral orders from someone who's been compromised?" "Yeah, whatever." Mac refocused on the laptop screen, its blue glow reflecting off the jet's cream-colored leather interior. "How far are you from hacking into the Consulate server?" Jessica asked from her seat in the next row, her Louboutins crossed at the ankles. She had overheard their conversation, each worried whisper carrying clearly in the cabin's perfect acoustics. "Not very. We'll be done once we land." Wick opened his eyes, turned around in his swivel seat, and gazed straight at Mac. The cabin's mood lighting cast shadows across his face, making his stare even more unnerving. His expression revealed nothing, not fatigue, not irritation, not even acknowledgement of the tension crackling through the cabin. The steady drone of the engines shifted pitch slightly, and somewhere in the depths of Wick's mind, memory stirred unbidden. The compound in Tehran. Sterile corridors lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The cleric's eyes, not the fanatic Wick had expected, but something else, something that made extraction impossible. The weight of the decision pressing down like a physical force. 2 rounds, center mass, the mission parameters changing in real time because sometimes the intelligence briefing couldn't anticipate what you'd find in that final room. But none of this registered on Wick's features. His breathing remained steady, his posture unchanged. To the others, he appeared to be simply observing Mac with his usual calculating stillness. "Can you extract the details of all the passengers from Venezuela who have landed in Vienna over the last 48 hours? "Yeah, sure." Mac felt naked under that stare. Wick had that effect on people, as if he could read their darkest secrets through the expensive suits they wore like armor. "Any particular reason, or are we just fishing?" Mac wanted to ask, but then chose not to. "Thanks," Wick said and turned around. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the challenge, didn't say anything else. The soft hum of the jet engines filled the silence. Mac shook his head and peered back at the laptop screen. Jessica glanced at Wick, who was checking his phone, its screen illuminating his features in the dimmed cabin lighting. She had worked with him a couple of times in the past, but this time he seemed a bit off, like a wrong note in a familiar symphony. She didn't know what to make of her observations, but decided to keep her thoughts to herself. His phone's glow reflected off the window, and for just a moment Jessica thought she caught something in his expression, a flicker of something that might have been pain or memory. But when she looked again, his face was its usual mask of professional indifference. Whatever ghosts Wick was carrying, he carried them alone. In 30 minutes they were going to land at Vienna International Airport. Through the jet's large windows, dawn was breaking over Europe, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose gold, a beautiful backdrop for whatever darkness awaited them below. Chapter 6. The stillness in the pressurized cabin air was in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Wick. The information he had come across during his just-concluded mission in Poland churned in his gut like acid, shaking him to his core. He wasn't one to be easily perturbed. Men in his line of work couldn't afford that luxury, but what he had learned made him question his very existence, like discovering the ground beneath your feet was nothing but quicksand. Flashes from his childhood swirled in his mind like fragments of a broken mirror, the taste of copper flooding his mouth, blood from where Kevin Morrison had slammed his head against the dormitory bathroom sink. 7 years old and learning that being an orphan made you pray. The smell of industrial bleach couldn't mask the stench of fear sweat and cruelty. Other boys forming a circle, their faces twisted with pack animal glee. "Nobody wants you, that's why you're here." The echo of his own sobs bouncing off tile walls, the way his ribs screamed where they'd kicked him when he tried to curl into a ball, and afterward, the terrible silence. No adult coming to check, no gentle voice asking if he was okay, just darkness and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of the same. Cold sweat threatened to bead on his forehead, but Wick's training kicked in. Controlled breathing, muscle relaxation, compartmentalization. To anyone watching, he appeared to be simply resting with his eyes closed. He had been an orphan as far back as he could remember, a ghost in an institution. He had struggled through boarding school, bullied and beaten mercilessly at times, the taste of copper in his mouth becoming as familiar as breakfast. What made it worse was he had no one to write home to, no shoulder to cry on, no voice to ask for advice or simply to vent his frustrations. He also had no friends, no bond with anyone at school, moving through the halls like a shadow. An average student, his presence or lack of it made no impact on anyone, anywhere, a skill that would later serve him well in his chosen profession. From as far back as he could remember, his only real connection to the outside world was a P.O. box, its brass door gleaming under fluorescent lights. On the 5th of every month, there was an envelope with his name on it, crisp and white as fresh snow, with enough bills tucked inside to sustain him over the next 30 days. The money always smelled fresh, as if it had just been printed. There were never any sender's details on it, the envelope as anonymous as its source. He had originally tried to find the man who sent him the money, kept an eagle eye on the post office during his days off, but never spotted anyone suspicious among the steady stream of faces. After some time, he made peace with the situation. It wasn't worth it. Whoever his patron was, he clearly wasn't interested in meeting him in person, preferring to remain a shadow behind the curtain. Around his 15th birthday, along with the cash, he received a note and a West Point Military Academy brochure, both pristine as if they'd never been touched by human hands. The crux of the letter was that his benefactor wanted him to go to West Point next. If he decided not to pursue that career option, he was free to seek his interests elsewhere, but without the monthly financial aid. Sam checked the brochure, its glossy pages cool under his fingertips. Key paragraphs and specific directives had already been marked with precise red lines, like drops of blood on paper. Sam had not thought about his career options till then, and despite the fact that the choice had literally been shoved down his throat by dangling a financial carrot, he found that he kind of liked the prospect of being in the forces. One of the reasons was that they would teach him to fight. If nothing else, it would be satisfying to get even with his bullies in the language they knew best, the language of violence. His life became a whirlwind after that. Eventually, to protect his sanity, he had to stop thinking about his parents and about that mystery patron, locking those thoughts away in a mental vault. The monthly communication stopped the day he graduated from the academy and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, the last envelope containing nothing but a blank sheet of paper. His life had been very busy since then, getting dropped into dangerous places and then trying to get out of there alive, each mission adding another layer to his armor. Until 2 weeks ago. He had been sent to Poland. His job was to extract a man called Albert who was being held captive by the Polish mafia. The mission wasn't a complete success. When Wick had found him, he had already been injected with a lethal virus. Despite the best efforts of a team of doctors, Albert couldn't make it to U.S. soil, succumbing during the journey, his last breath fogging the airplane window. The scene was still vivid in his memory, etched there like acid on metal. Albert recognized his end was near. The virus had already consumed his liver and lungs to the point of no salvage, turning his organs to mush. He had expected to meet his creator in that dank cell, the stench of mold his last sensation. But Wick and the doctors had extended his life, even though only by a few hours. But he couldn't just die. Not just yet. Not after seeing Wick. "Remember me?" the man had asked, his voice barely a whisper above the hum of the aircraft engines. Wick had no idea what he was talking about. The confusion must have been evident on his face because Albert's expression changed, his eyes flickering with desperate urgency. "Your father knows me." Each word was a struggle, like stones being dragged across gravel. "My father." The word felt foreign on Wick's tongue. "Did you go to West Point?" "Yes." 09132. "You know anything about that?" The man had begun to shiver, his breathing shallow, the monitors beeping in irregular rhythm. Ice flooded Wick's veins. It was the code to his locker at West Point. No one knew about it, even at the academy. "Your father, he told me." Albert's skin had taken on a waxy sheen. He came with the president. Your mother. Good. Your father. Killer. The man was speaking almost to himself now, his words slurring together like melting ice. Wick's heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced his expression to remain neutral. And finally, as death claimed him, Lao. Ren. So he was not an orphan. His parents abandoned him. The sense of betrayal burned in his gut like acid, a fire that had been building within him for which he had no outlet. They had given birth to him and then left him to die. Why? Was he born out of wedlock, an unwanted child? What if they knew he was alive? What if they knew what he did for a living? What if it was they who paid for his schooling and the academy through that P.O. box? For the next 2 weeks, he pondered over these questions, pacing his safe house like a caged tiger. Should he go and look for them? There would be thousands of Laurens in the world, each name a dead end in a labyrinth. The number of U.S. presidents Albert might have seen probably hovered in double digits, and he had no way to know which one Albert was talking about. Without a year or a specific duration, that part of the search was a non-starter. Albert was dead and buried. His secrets turned to ash. Then the call came from his handler Riley for this mission. At first he'd said that he needed time, but then he agreed. A diversion would do him good, like morphine for a festering wound. But sitting in that private jet, the leather seat cool against his back, he realized that he couldn't run from his own thoughts. He could not unhear or unsee what he knew. He could do nothing to stop his mind from wandering into the dark bylanes of memory. He was still angry, the flames burning within him, each breath feeding the fire for which he had no outlet. Landing in 2 minutes, the pilot announced over the intercom, his voice crisp and professional. You ready? Jessica touched Wick's shoulder softly, and he jerked as if he had been in deep sleep, his body tensing like a drawn bow. He nodded without looking at her and bent down to grab his bag from under the seat, its weight familiar and reassuring. The aircraft descended, its flaps down, its powerful Rolls-Royce engines working to their maximum capacity, trying to stifle its speed all the way back. The tarmac at Vienna International Airport shone in the distance, like polished obsidian while the jet maneuvered for the touchdown, the city lights twinkling below like a field of stars. As soon as they landed, the countdown began, each tick bringing them closer to whatever waited in the shadows of the ancient city. Chapter 7. Terminal 3, Vienna Schwechat Airport. The surveillance cameras panned in their pre-programmed 90-second intervals across arrival gate C4. Wick traversed the blind spot between cameras 23 and 24, his canvas bag precisely positioned to shield his facial profile from the sensors. The airport's new biometric facial recognition system had been installed just 3 weeks ago, information absent from any official press release. 20 seconds later, Stan glided through the same gap in the surveillance network, followed by Mac, then Jessica. Each took a different path through the terminal, calculated movements appearing as random passenger patterns on the security center's monitors. Airport security had adjusted their routines following tightened EU directives. 2 officers from WIGA, Austria's elite unit, patrolled the arrival area in 12-minute intervals. Wick had memorized their rhythm during the last 3 cycles, 4 minutes until their next round. Mac was halfway to the Turkish coffee shop, Adoro, when his tablet flickered, just for a microsecond. A ghost in the machine, some kind of phantom signal interference. He made a mental note to run diagnostics later, though the device seemed to stabilize immediately. Across the mirrored marble floors of the clearance hall, Austrian granite from the Tauern Mountains, Wick caught the exit's reflection in a cleaning cart. Transit Area B3 served as his preferred observation point, offering clear sight lines to both main entrances and emergency exits. The navy blue baseball cap bearing the Vienna City Works logo appeared exactly on schedule. Jakob leaned against Pillar 7C, using the Kronen Zeitung newspaper as cover, his field of vision spanning 160 degrees. Stan passed the predetermined mark, 2.5 meters from Jakob. The signet ring from Federal Army property on Jakob's right hand confirmed his identity. Stan activated his transmitter, disguised as a standard OBB earpiece with an imperceptible touch. A child's piercing wail suddenly cut through the terminal's ambient noise. A 5-year-old boy had broken free from his mother's grip near the baggage carousel, running directly toward the WICKED patrol. Both officers turned, hands instinctively moving toward their weapons as protocol demanded they investigate any unusual activity. Wick froze mid-stride. Jessica paused at the Western Union branch, her eyes tracking the officer's movement. Max stopped pretending to read coffee shop menus. Stan's finger hovered over his earpiece, ready to abort. The mother caught her son after 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. The officers relaxed, resuming their patrol route with bureaucratic indifference. But one of them, the younger one with the crew cut, let his gaze linger on Wick for just a beat longer than normal. Recognition? Suspicion? Or just the natural wariness of a trained security professional? Wick maintained his casual pace, internally calculating distance to exits and response times. The officer's eyes moved on, drawn by a businessman arguing loudly into his phone in rapid-fire German. Crisis averted, but the margin for error had just shrunk considerably. Mac headed for the Turkish coffee shop, the aroma of freshly ground beans masking potential chemical detection dogs. Through the automatic sliding doors of exit A4, he stepped into Vienna's morning heat, the tablet's earlier glitch still nagging at him. Jessica lingered at the Western Union branch, her eyes scanning the digital exchange rate board. In reality, she was mapping civilian security force positions in the area. 30 seconds later, she followed Mac's trail. A gray Ford Transit Custom, 2023 model diesel engine with throttled performance, B4 grade armor classification beneath its deceptively ordinary bodywork, waited in the third loading zone between a DHL truck and an NH hotel shuttle bus. The team converged from different vectors, each conducting a final sweep of their sectors. The hydraulically dampened sliding door opened silently. Entry followed the Oslo Protocol, a formation ensuring maximum response capability within minimal time windows. Jakob's eyes met Wick's in the ballistic rearview mirror for a fifth of a second. "Smooth as silk," Jakob said with a slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Almost like you've done this before." Something in his tone made Jessica glance at him sharply, too knowing, too comfortable, as if he'd been expecting them long before the official briefing. The transit merged seamlessly into airport traffic flow, maintaining exactly 3 miles per hour under the speed limit. At the first intersection to Schwechater Hauptstrasse, Jakob turned south, then east, via Himbergerstrasse. Their route followed a seemingly chaotic but deeply calculated pattern through Vienna's street network, designed to elude any potential surveillance. Inside the van's hushed interior, focused silence reigned. Mac's ThinkPad X1 Carbon displayed digitized blueprints of the Venezuelan Consulate, high-resolution scans of original plans from Vienna's building authority, supplemented with thermographic imaging of the structure. Wick studied every angle of the architecture with military precision. "Show me the utility shafts in the east wing," he directed Mac. His fingers traced hidden access points, potential weaknesses in the building's security. Stan simultaneously documented each escape route, each door, categorized by EVA Security Systems, Austria's leading manufacturer of high-security locks. "Personnel profiles," Wick commanded tersely. Mac accessed the Austrian Foreign Police Information System database. 72 Venezuelan nationals had entered through Vienna Schwechater Airport in the past 48 hours. Filter, age 18 to 40, business travelers only. Wick's instruction was precise. The software reduced the list to 37 targets. "Mobile tracking?" Stan inquired. Mac initiated the GSM tracking module. A one network shows 31 active signals, 6 targets offline. "Those interest us," Wick confirmed. "Professional operatives don't use registered SIM cards." Mac nodded, recognizing the oversight. The stress of working with Wick was affecting his usual sharp focus, a blind spot he couldn't afford. The transit turned into Donaustadt. Jakob activated the anti-vehicle tracking system. "Safe house in 5 minutes. Equipment check." Each team member methodically verified their assigned equipment in the transport compartments under the seats. The cover identities had been crafted with surgical precision by Task Force 77. Wick operated under the legend of an IT security consultant from London, complete with digital presence and verified LinkedIn profile. Jessica assumed the role of a Spanish economic journalist for El País, equipped with valid press credentials and documented publication history. Stan traveled as a Swiss trading company representative, while Mac posed as an Audi sales consultant attending an international sales seminar in Vienna. Scenarios ran through Wick's mind, calculated as coldly as a chess computer. Once inside the building, every second would count. The transit glided silently into the safe house's underground garage. The mission had begun. Chapter 8. Safe House, Vienna. Jacob dropped off Wick and Mac at the safe house. Vienna's cool autumn air briefly rushed through the opening door before it silently closed again. Jessica and Stan were still in the field, making preparations for tomorrow's operation. The two-man configuration left Mac feeling exposed, vulnerable, not because he doubted his own capabilities, but because being alone with Wick meant no buffer, no witnesses to whatever unpredictable decision the man might make. Wick's efficiency was so absolute, so devoid of human quirks or hesitation, that it unnerved Mac more than any overt aggression would have. Unlike Jessica, whose tactical decisions were always comprehensible. Or Stan, whose military conditioning displayed clear behavioral patterns, Wick remained an enigma, wrapped in lethally precise movements. Without a word, Wick headed for his assigned room. A Black Eagle Molly 2 combat bag already lay on Wick's narrow field bed, standard Task Force 77 equipment. His spartanly furnished room contained only a metal side table, on which sat a thermos and pre-portioned rations. Mac retreated to his own room where his technical arsenal awaited. 3 laptops sat in a triangle on the reinforced table. His primary Alienware M18 with custom liquid cooling, a hardened Panasonic Toughbook for field operations, and a stripped-down Raspberry Pi cluster disguised as a portable gaming device. Each machine served a specific purpose in his digital warfare toolkit. He powered up the Alienware and immediately noticed something wrong. The Wi-Fi scanner showed 14 networks when there should have been 11. 3 new access points had appeared since their arrival, all with generic router names that screamed surveillance honeypot. "Someone's watching the watchers," Mac muttered, launching Wireshark to analyze network traffic. The packet capture showed encrypted data streams bouncing between the mysterious access points every 30 seconds. Classic pattern. They were being monitored. He activated his custom VPN tunnel, routing through 7 countries in 4 seconds, then launched Nmap to probe the consulate's external network. The initial scan revealed standard diplomatic security, a Cisco ASA firewall, Juniper routers, and what looked like a Fortinet IDS system. Nothing unusual for a government facility, but when he ran a more aggressive scan checking for unusual open ports, something interesting appeared. Port 8443 was open and responding, a non-standard HTTPS port that shouldn't exist on a diplomatic building's external network. "Amateur hour," Mac whispered, recognizing the signature of a hastily installed remote access system. Someone inside the consulate had installed unauthorized backdoor access. The question was whether it belonged to Venezuelan intelligence or someone else entirely. He launched Metasploit and loaded a custom exploit module, essentially a digital lockpick designed to probe that mysterious port 8443. The beauty of the exploit was its subtlety. It would test the door without triggering alarms. 20 minutes later, as Mac was deep in his network analysis, Wick's voice called from the next room. "Mac, you eaten yet?" Mac paused his typing. "I've got rations in my room." "Check what I have first," Wick called back. Mac saved his work and walked to Wick's doorway. The arsenal in Wick's open bag made him swallow hard: a disassembled Beretta 92 FS with tactical accessories, a modified Remington 870 with shortened barrel, an Accuracy International AWS, an MP5SD with suppressor. Each weapon laid out in precise order. Mac's weapons were different, lines of code that could cripple governments, algorithms that could turn enemy systems against themselves. Mac glanced at the rations on Wick's side table. Thanks, but I'm good with what I have. Fair enough. Wick continued his methodical weapon inspection. Status report on those operation profiles. The operation profiles you wanted, Mac said, pulling up his tablet. I've identified 10 potential targets with suspicious patterns in their backgrounds, multi-year dark periods, followed by surname changes while retaining first names. Wick nodded approvingly as he cleaned his primary Beretta with practiced movements. Retained first names. Classic rookie mistake. Exactly, Mac confirmed. But there's something else. The Consulate's network security is interesting. Someone's installed unauthorized remote access. Port 8443 is wide open. Wick's hands paused mid-motion with the weapon. Time frame for complete network infiltration? Mac glanced at his mental checklist. The exploit was showing promising results. The network mapping revealed multiple vulnerabilities, and his honeypot analysis needed another hour to definitively identify the surveillance pattern. 3 to 4 hours for complete access, maybe 2 if their security is as sloppy as it appears. Good. Wick precisely mounted a KAC suppressor on his MP5. What's your assessment of tomorrow's operation? Mac shifted uncomfortably. You're asking me about tactical planning? I'm asking about variables, electronic warfare, communication intercepts, digital support. Wick's ice blue eyes fixed on Mac with uncomfortable intensity. Your job. Right. Mac collected his thoughts. If we're going in as cleaning staff, I can provide real-time surveillance through their camera systems, jam their communications if necessary, and create digital diversions, But the plan feels incomplete. We're walking into a high-security facility without knowing their exact security protocols, their staffing levels, or their response procedures. Wick methodically checked his weapon's sights. Plans adapt to circumstances. Rigid planning gets operators killed. And no planning gets them killed faster. Mac shot back, immediately regretting his tone. The silence stretched between them. Wick set down his weapon and fixed Mac with that predatory stare. You have concerns about my leadership? Mac's mouth went dry. I have concerns about operational security. The Iran situation. Iran was different. How was it different? The words tumbled out before Mac could stop them. You had clear extraction orders, and you executed the asset instead. What happens if you make another judgment call tomorrow? Wick's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the quality of his stillness. That won't happen. How can you guarantee that? Because, Wick said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, even in Iran I ensured no casualties in my team. That's my guarantee. Mac's laptop chimed softly from the other room. His exploit had found something significant. I think it's calling you, Mac, Wick said as he turned to look at Mac. Tomorrow, follow orders. Trust the plan, even when you can't see it. Mac didn't say anything, but as he turned to leave, he caught sight of something through the window. Jacob in the courtyard below, speaking quietly into a phone. The conversation was brief, intense, and when Jacob noticed Mac watching, he ended the call immediately and walked away. Strange. The metallic click of a chambered round followed Mac through the corridor, along with the nagging question of who Jacob had been talking to, and whether the back door into the consulate systems had anything to do with their operation. Tomorrow's mission was going to be more complex than any of them anticipated. Chapter 9. Safe House, Vienna. The heavy door clicked shut as Jessica and Stan arrived 2 hours later. Mac sat hunched in the common area, his eyes locked on 3 laptop screens displaying a symphony of digital warfare. Command terminals scrolled with penetration testing results, network traffic analysis painted real-time threat maps, and custom scripts probed the Venezuelan consulate's defenses like digital scalpels searching for the perfect incision point. Where's Wick? Jessica asked, shedding her tactical gear. Training run, probably. Mac replied without breaking his focus from the encrypted data streams flowing across his primary monitor. His fingers never stopped moving, launching SQL injection attempts against the consulate's web applications, while simultaneously maintaining a persistent connection through that mysterious port, 8443. "He told you that?" Stan pressed, leaning against the worn doorframe. "His workout gear speaks for itself," Mac muttered, but his tone carried more edge than usual. On his secondary screen, a custom Python script was systematically testing the consulate's email server for vulnerabilities, essentially trying thousands of digital keys to find one that fit. Probably practicing his trigger discipline. The barb wasn't lost on Stan. "Perfect, we can trash talk him while he's gone." Stan grinned, dropping into one of the beaten-up armchairs. Mac let out a humorless laugh. The screen in front of him pulsed with incoming data packets. He'd successfully compromised a low-level workstation inside the consulate and was now using it as a stepping stone to reach more valuable targets. The process was like digital archaeology, carefully brushing away layers of security to uncover the valuable data buried beneath. "Thought you lived for office gossip," Stan needled. "Usually do, but maybe not while I'm performing lateral movement through a foreign government's internal network." Mac's voice sharpened with irritation. His screen showed the consulate's internal network topology, a complex web of servers, workstations, and security devices that he was mapping in real time. Besides, shouldn't you be cleaning your rifle or doing push-ups or whatever meatheads do to prepare? Stan's grin faltered. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This is a precision operation requiring electronic surveillance, digital infiltration, and real-time data analysis. Not exactly your wheelhouse, is it?" Mac's exploit had just cracked into the consulate's scheduling system, basically their digital appointment book. What he found made his blood run cold. Carlos Cruz Diaz was scheduled for a 9 a.m. appointment in Conference Room B, but there was a second entry that shouldn't exist. Facility Maintenance, Room B, scheduled for 8:45 a.m. with no listed personnel. "Well, at least you two haven't killed each other yet," Jessica said, but the tension in the room had shifted from playful to genuinely hostile. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mac demanded, slowly rising from his chair while keeping one eye on his screens. The network monitoring showed encrypted communications spiking between Conference Room B and an external server in Caracas. Someone was preparing for Carlos's arrival. "Nothing." Stan's face was no longer innocent. "Just saying that you obviously can't stand the guy." "He can't handle not being able to read Wick," Jessica chimed in, crossing her arms. "That about sum it up, Mac?" Stan's voice carried a sharper edge now. "You're pissed because your precious algorithms can't compute human unpredictability? I'm concerned because our team leader went off script in Iran and executed an asset instead of extracting him." Mac fired back, though part of his attention remained on the privilege escalation attack he was running against the consulate's domain controller, essentially trying to gain administrator access to their entire network. "Data doesn't lie, Stan. Operators who deviate from mission parameters have a significantly higher casualty rate." Iran was different. How was it different? Because you say so? Because you buy into his mystique? Mac's voice tightened as his attack succeeded. He now had administrative access to the consulate's network, the digital keys to the kingdom. "I've analyzed his operational history. Yes, he's effective, but effectiveness without reliability is just organized chaos." Stan took a threatening step forward. "You want to know the difference between you and him? He's been shot at. He's bled for this country. You push buttons from a safe distance and think that makes you qualified to judge. And you think muscle memory and marksmanship make you qualified to understand complex strategic operations?" Mac shot back while simultaneously deploying a persistent backdoor in the consulate's systems, his digital insurance policy that would survive system reboots and security sweeps. "This isn't Afghanistan, Stan. This is Vienna. Diplomatic soil, political implications. One wrong move and we start an international incident." "Enough, both of you." Jessica cut in sharply, but she was studying their faces, noting how quickly the banter had turned personal. Mac's screen flashed with an urgent alert. He'd intercepted an encrypted message from Conference Room B's computer to that Caracas server. The encryption was military grade, but Mac's quantum-resistant algorithms were already working to crack it. Breaking the code would take time, but the metadata told him everything he needed to know. The message had been sent exactly 12 minutes ago, and it contained biometric data. Someone inside the consulate had just confirmed Carlos's physical appearance to handlers in Venezuela. "I don't have any issues with him," Mac continued, his voice dangerously quiet while his fingers flew across the keyboard, deploying countermeasures against the Venezuelan surveillance network he'd discovered. "I have issues with blind faith in someone whose judgment might be compromised." "Leave my judgment out of this," Stan snapped. "Hey, if your mother can put up with your judgment calls, I guess I can handle his," Mac replied with a provocative smile, though internally he was focused on the digital war he was fighting. His countermeasures had successfully disrupted the Venezuelan surveillance network for now. Stan's fist clenched. "Leave my mother out of this. She brought you into this world without getting clearance from above," Mac fired back while installing a network monitoring daemon that would alert him to any unusual activity. "Probably your only successful extraction." Jessica's lips twitched. She couldn't help it. Mac's insults had a surgical precision that reminded her of their shared training days, when he'd demolished overconfident field operatives with similar verbal scalpel work. "That's enough," she stepped between them. "Mac, focus on your work, and Stan, maybe channel that aggression into something productive." "You too, Jessica," Stan protested, but his anger was deflating. "Well, it is pretty rich that the great sniper still lives with Mommy Dearest," Mac teased, returning to his keyboard where a new alert demanded his attention. The Venezuelan network was attempting to restore its surveillance capabilities, adapting to his countermeasures with impressive speed. "She needs me," Stan defended weakly. "Is that why none of your relationships make it past the trial period?" Mac pressed while launching a more aggressive attack against the Venezuelan restoration attempts. "Because you're too busy being a good son?" "No, that's because of this damn job. But what would you know about it, basement dweller? I'm twice the man you'll ever be. You're so manly they'll put your junk in the Smithsonian as a warning to future generations." "Impossible to have a rational conversation with you," Mac growled, turning pointedly back to his laptop where his encryption-breaking algorithm had finally succeeded. The intercepted message appeared in clear text, and what he read made his stomach drop. "Thank you for joining us on this thrilling part of Wicked Deceit written by Chase Austen. If you love relentless pace, suspense, and gripping intensity, go to thechaseausten.com right now to download your free starter books and join the inner circle. See you soon."